It's about time you have an easier, more efficient way to get caught up on the news. The Newsworthy breaks down the day's top stories in less than 15 minutes and gives you some lighter conversation starters along the way. Search The Newsworthy wherever you're listening now and follow or subscribe to The Newsworthy today.
When I need to impress someone with a gift, I go straight to 1-800-Flowers. There's a reason they've spent 50 years as the floral authority. Every stem is hand-selected by a vetted florist, and with same-day delivery nationwide, 100% satisfaction guaranteed. That's why millions go to 1-800-Flowers to celebrate life's most important moments. Order now for up to 40% off. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Act now and save up to 40% at 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast.
Some lives unfold in private. Others unfold in public. Betsy Lyon belonged to the second category. Her story appears in print, in headlines, in court filings before we even get to the contested will. Her name was not whispered. It was published. She was young, visible, and reasonably well-positioned when the legal battles began. There is something familiar about the outline that drives these kinds of headlines. The beauty, the name, the way legal conflict becomes public narrative, the love of her life and a compelling note from the grave, the sense that the courtroom itself was part stage. There is a murder-suicide question where Betsy is front and center before our battle over the contested will. There is a quick resolution driven by a love letter from the beyond. Betsy Lyon was not a character. She wasn't playing to an audience. Her life just did not resolve itself neatly. The timing, the attention, the collision of beauty, law, and media headlines. The tension between myth and record, between drama and fact, is where her story belongs. In 1947, there were no publicists, no press teams, no crisis managers. Not like we know today. Families like hers didn't need them. Attorneys spoke carefully. Editors understood the stakes. Reputation arrived first. A friendly reminder to the listener, at this point, we're still 4 years away from the contested will court case that brought us all together. The best place to start is May 10th, 1947 in Chicago. That's when the headlines from the Chicago Daily Tribune read, "Dancer's Mate, Found Shot to Death in Hotel." An excerpt further explains, Theodore Deutsch, 30, was found shot to death yesterday evidently by his own hand in a room of the Sheraton Eastwood Hotel. Interesting choice of the word evidently this early in a case. Reporters, setting the stage for sure. The article goes on to mention that there was a note from Deutsch addressed to Betsy that stated in part, "You are my beginning and my end. Every time someone kisses or touches you, you will remember me." Deutsch then adds, "If it is at all possible, I shall watch you every waking hour and in the hush of night." Deutsch also wrote a poem of sorts to their 1-year-old son, Teddy, that advised this, "He doesn't know in his pleasure how lonely and sad his dad is today." And the article goes on to advise that Betsy wrote him 10 days ago, that he could get a divorce. It all seemed to a little too tight for me when I read this, that even in today's electronic age, that this level of detailed reporting couldn't be delivered in less than 1 day. Let's let the headlines continue on to the next day, though, and see where that takes us. On May 11th, 1947, the Washington Daily News shows a photo of Betsy beneath her headline, quote, that reads, "We socialites must have no scandal." There is no byline. However, the paper writes, Betsy, the 21-year-old Washington debutante, whose sophisticated existence once was the talk of capital society, today began a new life under the shadow of a bitter curse leveled at her by her estranged husband from beyond the grave. Then on the same day, in the Evening Star, a Washington, D.C. periodical advised that a coroner's jury ruled the death, a suicide. The jury had heard a letter from Betsy to her husband Deutsch that indicated that she must for a while at least be free of all ties. The article then went on to elaborate and expand at great length about her writings. Listen as I read from the manuscript of her letter to her husband that shortly preceded his death. "My life and my likes are not yours. I found my niche in the wall of life, and though I shall not say it is either below or above yours, I must say it is not yours." And then an interesting little intercept that will take us back to the courtrooms in 1951. She wrote a prescient note. "I can only hope you will try and understand and continue to be a father that Freddie, our son, will be proud of. He certainly can't be proud of her mother's family. Remember that I also, in my own funny way, love our son very much." Let's unpack this contextually and contemplate how it got into the papers with such detail in so many locations so quickly. There was no internet. What matters here is not just what she wrote, but how it traveled. The article didn't summarize her words. It reproduced them, at length, with care. That tells us something immediately. In the early 1950s, newspapers did not casually publish private writings, and especially not from women involved in active legal disputes, unless those writings were provided deliberately. There were no leaks in the modern sense. For passages like these to appear in multiple papers, someone had to place them there. That someone was almost certainly acting with intent, whether it came directly from her, through an attorney, or via someone close enough to understand the stakes. The impact is the same. The writings function as context setting, not confession. They frame her not as reckless or emotional, but as reflective, self-aware, and principled. Take the first line, "My life and my likes are not yours." That is not written for a diary. That is written to be read. It establishes boundaries, independence, a refusal to be defined by another person's expectations, especially in a moment. Courts, the press, and family structures were attempting to do exactly that. And then there's the second passage, the one that echoes forward into the courtrooms of 1951. She speaks not to the public, but to a father. She invokes a child. She contrasts pride and shame between families. That is not accidental language. It's moral positioning. If these words reached the papers, they did so because they served a purpose in humanizing her without surrendering control, to introduce motive without admitting fault, and to influence how judges, reporters, and readers understood her role before the legal record fully hardened. In a world before social media, this was how the narrative traveled. This wasn't oversharing, it was strategy. And once it was printed, it became part of the permanent public record, waiting quietly to be read again decades later. And there's a part of me that knows that this in and of itself is plenty to digest. The speed, the detail, that there's no need to go further. However, there's two more pieces of this puzzle that will help us see and know Betsy more completely. Later, there's another article about the incident, a final story that appeared in Parade magazine, which changed the scale. Parade was not a daily paper. It didn't chase disputes or rehearse arguments. It arrived on Sunday mornings, folded into millions of newspapers, read at kitchen tables across the country. If a story made it into Parade, it had already been judged worthy of national attention and national interpretation. The moment when a private conflict became a public narrative, when a local legal fight was reframed as something larger, more symbolic, instructive, even representative. Parade didn't just tell readers what happened. It told them how to understand it. And once that happened, there was no going back for Betsy. Whatever followed in the courtrooms would now unfold under a different light, not just before judges and lawyers, but before an audience that had already been introduced to a version of Betsy that had been carefully selected, carefully worded, and widely shared. In a pre-digital world, this was as loud as it could get. The exclamation point at the end of the sentence. The article was entitled "The Tragedy of the Deb and the XGI," and was written by Charles Davis Jr. in 1949. The compelling thing in the Parade article is her photo. The photograph shows Betsy seated close to a window, turned slightly inward, her attention divided between the camera and something just out of frame. Her hair is dark and softly waved, set close to her head in a style that places the image firmly in the late 1940s. There is no dramatic lighting. The contrast is gentle. Nothing about the photograph feels staged for effect, even though it certainly is. She wears a dark, short-sleeved top and a simple pearl necklace. It's unadorned, almost practical. Her posture is relaxed, but contained, one arm drawn in toward her body, the other resting near a small dog perched beside her. A small lap dog, the kind people would have called a Pekingese at the time, sits beside her. The dog is alert, its fur light against her darker clothing, looking outward while she looks slightly down and to the side. Her expression is what holds the frame. It is composed, thoughtful, and restrained. Seen now, the photograph doesn't project defiance. It suggests control, poise, a person accustomed to being looked at and savvy enough to know what she's doing. It's the kind of image that invites interpretation. Oh, the second piece of our tight timeline? A month after the death of her husband Deutsch, Betsy marries again. On June 21, 1947, she marries Harry Kelly, a boxer and bellhop. What happens next is a reminder that some stories are lived, and some are staged, and sometimes the difference is thinner than we want it to be. All this to say, this is why I keep thinking about the movie Chicago. Partly because of where the suicide happened, partly because a husband died from a gunshot wound, but mostly because fame can be a monster that's difficult to feed and keep tame, all at the same time. In Chicago, Roxy and Velma demonstrate that attention is currency. During the court cases, they are at their peak. Then a decision inevitably comes, and when notoriety fades, people choose what they do next. In the show, the characters don't retreat, they adapt. They join forces, turn conflict into performance, and step back into the spotlight together. Fame returns, burning brighter, albeit briefer, always temporary. Real life doesn't offer choreography, but it does offer something else. Because in our story, the spotlight fades for Betsy after the parade article. However, it will return some 4 years later. For Betsy, the second act isn't a double act. No, not with all that main character energy. The contested will bring her back into public view as a key character and as a claimant. And once again, the courtroom and newspapers become the stage. That's where we're headed next. Ripped from yesterday's headlines, all the details in our next episode from the courtroom case of Irene Lyon's contested will.